Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian Renteria, and today on this episode of the podcast, I am looking at the year so far. We've officially crossed the halfway point of the year, and what an interesting year it has been, to say the least. Of course, not just in terms of movies, but just in terms of the overall year. But this is a movie podcast, so we're going to be talking about movies. Now, usually when I do this episode, I run down the movies that I have liked, enjoy, talk about them a little bit. And then I realized last year's, looking back at what I did last year and the years past, and especially, at the end of the year, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot because I only saw, them once, or my views haven't really changed at all. So I'm not really, saying anything new, or basically, basically just repeating myself. And no one wants to hear that. No one wants that, on a podcast or anything like that. So I'm going to do this podcast this episode a little differently this year. And I'm still going to talk about some of my favorite movies of the year so far, and even not some, not so favorites. But I'm going to be talking about things that everyone on film Twitter is talking about a little bit. And I want to give my 2 cents on that. And first of all, yes, we are going to talk about the box office. Timestamps down below if you don't, care about any of this kind of stuff. I'm not going to go through like numbers and stuff like that, but I'm going to talk about the box office as a whole. I'm going to at least tell you the top 10 highest grossing movies of the year so far, at the time of this recording anyway. Inside Out 2, which just came out and is, killing it at the box office. Doom Part 2, which held that title for a very long time until Inside Out 2 came out. Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, Kung Fu Panda 4, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Bad Boys: Ride or Die, Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, surprisingly, for a lot of people, Bob Marley: One Love, and The Fall Guy. Those are your top 10 movies of the year. So coincidentally, obviously before Inside Out 2 came over, which is, Disney and Pixar, Warner Brothers owned the top 2 spots. Of course, Doom Part 2 and Godzilla Kong: New Empire, both Warner Brothers. But the question this year with all the new movies has been, what is happening to the box office? And that really happened more at the beginning of the year, because that doesn't seem to really be the question kind of now, recently. There's been some movies that have been quote unquote overperforming, like Bad Boys, Inside Out 2 when that dropped. Box office numbers have been, at least again at the beginning of the year, have been down more than ever, even, with the movies that are quote unquote overperforming. The first big weekend really of the year, Memorial Day, had one of the most anticipated movies of the year in Furiosa, and also had, an alternative movie for those who are not interested in Furiosa, a kid-friendly movie in the Garfield movie. Both movies couldn't break over $40 million. So why is that? Is it the dreadful word streaming, or even VOD fits in this category? Because since COVID, which I will get to in a minute, studios have changed their release schedule strategy. That's not including what Warner Brothers did during the pandemic with the day and date strategy that, everyone kind of hated and, didn't want, filmmakers didn't want. Studios, famously, Universal Pictures, they were really kind of the first, studio to be like, hey, this is happening, have a 15 to 17 day window for the majority of their movies. Once those days have passed, Universal, depending on the movie, depending how it's doing at the box office, will release the movie on VOD so people can watch it at home. The Fall Guy being, one of the most recent examples for Universal anyway, that made everyone throw their hands up in the air, even though it had been like this for the last really 4 years since COVID. I think it's also because people, saw The Fall Guy in theaters and they know how fun it is and they wanted more people to go watch it in theaters. And then it was, announced that it would be going to VOD, and everyone was very, mad about that, even though, again, that's how it's been since COVID. Blumhouse, kind of the same way. They are releasing certain movies the same day, doing that day and date release, releasing it in theaters and releasing it on Peacock. Not all of them, but, a good chunk of them, sort of. The last one they did was Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's was, on Peacock and in theaters, and it still did pretty well at the box office. We're getting a sequel, I think next year. And that's not saying that it's right. Just because they didn't do it with Oppenheimer, going back to Universal, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop doing it. Lionsgate, another studio, does it the same way. And the feeling is that other major studios could end up doing the same thing. They could end up following. But as sad as that is, the days of movies getting longer theater runs, I feel, are kind of gone. And sort of. Not all of them. Again, I think it depends on the theater chain and the studio. And just because The Fall Guy went to VOD doesn't mean it's no longer playing in theaters. It's still playing in theaters. You can still watch it in theaters. You can support The Fall Guy and other movies that fall into this category by going to the theater and watching it. You don't have to watch it at home. You can drag your friends, you can drag your family, you can drag someone who's been wanting to watch that movie and be like, hey, I will go with you to the movies if you want to go before this comes out and you don't want to watch it at home. You shouldn't have to force yourself to go watch a movie in theater, but the pandemic changed a lot of things in Hollywood and a lot of things on how people, fans, viewers watch movies. And this was going to be my last point, but we talked about it and I just want to kind of get to it now. Everyone seems to have forgotten the reason why everything is the way it is. It is because of COVID. Everyone doesn't want to talk about it. It's like they acknowledge it. It's not like it's Voldemort or Beetlejuice. COVID changed everything in Hollywood and the world. It shut down everything. It shut down movie theaters. You couldn't leave your house. And if you did, you were afraid of catching it. And when theaters started to reopen, there were things put in place to make, it safer for anyone that went. Theaters wouldn't let you buy certain seats. Certain sections were closed off. There were less showtimes in general. Sometimes the theater would close stupid early or open, later in the day. So they would have fewer showtimes. Drive-in theaters obviously made a comeback at that point, and some of them are still, around in certain, parts of the country. And even when theaters opened up, nothing was really coming out. There was, some stuff coming out, obviously with Warner Brothers and their day-and-date releases. Christopher Nolan, of course, famously released Tenet in the middle of the pandemic, hoping that that would be the thing that would drive fans back into theaters. And Tenet, did okay. It didn't do great, but I think in terms of what was happening in the world, I think the fact that it made the money that it did was still pretty impressive. Definitely, of course, definitely not what a Nolan movie usually does when it comes out in theaters. But again, it was literally right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. But the biggest thing is that people got comfortable at home. And, again, studios were releasing new movies on VOD or releasing them on their streaming services. Warner Brothers had Max, or HBO Max as it was known at the time. Pixar and Marvel, obviously dropped things on Disney Plus. Universal had Peacock and Lionsgate. Lionsgate had a deal with someone at the time. I can't remember who it was. So a family night out or date night was much easier because you could just go to your couch or your bed or your movie theater room, if you happen to have one, and watch a movie there. You didn't have to spend up to, $50, $60 on tickets and concessions and maybe parking, depending on if your movie theater has a, free parking or you got to pay for parking, or gas. Telling me you can save that much money and just watch it at home and pay, whatever the price was of a movie on a streaming service. Of course, there will be a movie that got us to go back to the theater so we can experience it on the big screen. You just had to wear a mask. You had to sit away from people. You wanted the movie theater going experience. But I think now fans have become much more pickier on what they want to go watch in a movie theater. Some fans, anyway. I know for myself, and I think I've talked about this briefly on the podcast in the past, or at least I've hoped I've talked about this. When theaters started opening up, my family and I were very much more cautious about going to the theaters. And we still are, to some extent. And we still go, nothing's really going to stop us from not going, if in case, unless it's like, family emergency or something like that. But my brother and I go in the movie theater all the time. And what we started doing was booking private theater rentals, which stuck around after the pandemic, and there's still people that do that. And when we didn't book a private theater, we would go either to the, quote unquote, stupid early shows, which was the first show of the day, or we would go during the week at a showtime that would either guarantee no one would be in there or there would be as few as people as possible. But I like the movie going experience. We have AMC A-lists, my brother and I, which maybe helps with that because, the $100 a year, we can go see 3 movies a week, even on the big platforms like IMAX and Dolby. Not this podcast is not sponsored by AMC A-list, by the way. And it's great because we can also check out the showtime and we can see if anyone showed up and, we can see, we can choose our seats and we don't have to worry about any of that. But I like going to the theater. I like the experience. I like the big screen. I like the movie speaker, the big movie speaker experience. I like that. And if that's not for you, great. If that's not for you now, great. But don't shit on people liking it, because that has become a thing now where people will crap all over other people who say, the movie going experience is dead. And then they'll, rattle off things that are true. And it's true. The movie going experience is not that great. And it's not as great as, obviously it depends on, where you live and, in the country. I think movie going experiences probably differ from state to state. But here in the Chicagoland area where I live and the theaters that I go to, it's relatively fine. No, big incidents, like I, hear some other people on other podcasts talk about. And I mentioned this briefly, and here's my next point. Are movie theaters just too expensive to go to now? Movie tickets, concessions in some areas can cost you a very big, pretty penny. And like I mentioned, if you're a family and you're probably easily spending somewhere close to, if not maybe over $100 on everything. Tickets, concessions, gas, parking, again, depending on your theater, snacks, all that stuff. Or if you're going by yourself, you're, maybe getting a popcorn and a soda. That's probably still somewhere in the $20, $30 range. Maybe. People don't want to spend that anymore. Obviously, the pandemic, affected a lot of people's jobs and they couldn't afford going to the movies. And movie theaters are continuing to raise their prices, even if it's like 50 cents. That 50 cents could be the determining factor of someone being like, I wasn't really, I wanted to go watch this movie, but I'm not, I don't know, should I buy a soda and all this? Obviously, movies make their money off concessions. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. And the next point, again, I mentioned again briefly, is the movie theater going experience dead? People are either on their phones, which sometimes means they have their brightness all the way up for some reason. They're not on silent, even though every theater chain has a silent your cell phone advert at the beginning of every, trailer, and at the end, the beginning of the trailers and at the very end of the trailers and all that. People are talking over a whisper, like a giant movie with surround sound is bothering their conversation with the person next to them. Or simply, people have forgotten how to behave and act in a public setting. So the charm of going to a theater is no longer there unless, again, you go to an early morning, middle of the day screening like myself, where there's no one around to ruin your experience. But I still like it. I do. I still like it. You're going to crap on me for liking the movie theater experience. Yeah, I'm not going to listen to it. I don't care. The other point, and again, this is the big point, and I think this is the point that people have been making, is that the lack of movies that interest people. This is one of those movie blogger podcast questions that you kind of really have to talk about. Are there any movies out there that are going to drag people back into a theater? What movie will it be? There isn't just anything interesting out there for me to watch, right? That's something that we hear people say a lot. We also hear people say, I can just watch it at home. Very common nowadays. Or not every movie needs to be watched in a theater. That's the other thing. And that usually comes with people saying that they don't like the movie going experience anymore. This is a double-edged sword. Because in order to get more movies, especially good quality movies, people need to watch them in theaters. And a lot of those quality good movies usually, if not, like I mentioned, come out in theaters. Every now and then you'll get something on streaming that's pretty good. But Hollywood needs to make money. Everyone knows that. Hollywood's thing is all about making money so they can make more movies or, get the ball rolling for someone who's going to come in and make one of those good quality movies again in a couple to a few years. But when streaming came out and it came into the fold and it started, changing the landscape of everything, there now became another market, if you will, that is giving audiences and fans something to watch. Netflix obviously was the first to drop those original movies. Prime Video came afterwards. HBO Max, Hulu, and now, we have all these other, streaming platforms. Now you can just watch an original movie on one of those streaming platforms if you happen to have it. And whether or not they're good or not, you'd be happy with that. You're telling me I can watch a subpar movie without leaving my house and not spending so much money while I can do other stuff around the house? Okay, I'll do that. If you're going to give me the option to watch a new horror movie out in theaters or watch a new horror movie on Netflix or Peacock or even Shudder, most people will probably pick the Shudder movie anyway because Shudder's been killing it on the new horror movie front. Of course, it also probably depends on the horror movie that you're watching in theaters. But they're probably going to pick Shudder, especially if they can stay home. Of course, everyone likes to bash on Marvel or even the superhero movies in general. Although, depending on the person, they'll just say all the Marvel movies, even though they're talking about superhero movies. But now that they aren't in the box office, because the only real big superhero movie we're going to get is coming out later this year, Deadpool and Wolverine, everyone is bringing them up. Like, oh, they ruined the box office. See, but, the box office is in trouble. And they're like, you know what could help the box office right now? A superhero movie. It's interesting, isn't it? How you don't want superhero movies, but now you want them because you want them to save the box office. Interesting. Anyway, audiences are pickier because of COVID. Because it literally stopped them from doing what they've been doing for years. And that was going to the movies, going to the theaters to watch what was new or to catch up on, older movies that came out the week before or 2 weeks before because they wanted to avoid the crowds. But now those movies, that style of doing that, of just waiting a couple weeks so the crowds to die down, that usually means that movie is now going to come out on VOD and you can just watch it at home. Personally, for me, I will spend my money and my time to go watch a movie because, the worst thing that can happen for me is I go watch a crappy movie and I lose 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And again, I just watch a subpar movie or watch a crappy movie, but I'm okay with that because I watched it in the theater and I got my big ass soda and my large popcorn or, whatever other snack I happen to have grabbed. That's just me personally. All right, that's it. I didn't want to mention that. I just wanted to mention that rather. I hope that just didn't come out as word vomit, but, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents into that conversation. But, let's just get to why we're here. The year so far, not really a list, really. Admittedly, 2024 has been a rough start. It didn't really feel like the movie year kicked off really until like kind of late February or somewhat even say the first week of March is really when the movie year kicked off, which was of course when Doom Part 2 came out. But once March hit, it felt like we were finally getting rolling. Now, before we get to everything, let me get you mad at me. Let me get you mad at me for, one, probably wasting your time, but also because there have been movies that have come out, big movies, that I have yet to watch. And I will watch them. I will get I will watch them. I will get a chance to watch them before the end of the year. But I want to tell those now. So Society of the Snow, which came out on Netflix. Mean Girls, still haven't watched it. Bob Marley, One Love, Spaceman, which is on Netflix. And probably the most damning of them all so far, I saw the TV Glow and Challengers. Move this man. Stop yelling. Stop. Let me get through the podcast and then you can yell at me on social media. But then, of course, I had to sit through some stinkers before, we get to the good stuff. So I'm going to talk about those. And some of those I've already talked about on the monthly roundups. Like Blumhouse, their early efforts, Night Swim, Imaginary, not good. Personally, thought they lacked the execution of their ideas. ISS, which didn't really deliver on the thriller aspect. Madam Web, which I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna talk about. Not even for the jokes, not even for the memes. Personally, I'm saying this wholeheartedly, honestly. I'm not saying it because I want to keep bashing on the movie. I think Madam Web is the worst movie I've seen so far this year. Just still to this day, still the worst movie I've seen so far. I know. Tarot gave it a good run for its money though. Also wasn't good. One of the worst eye rolling gags of the year, and I saw that it was on Twitter, and I saw it, and I just rolled my eyes again. Netflix's Under Paris was okay. It could have been better, but I feel like a lot of people have been really liking that movie. I guess I just don't get it. Maybe I got to go watch it again to get it. Rennie Harlan has had a pretty bad year so far. The Bricklayer and The Strangers Chapter 1, not good. I'm still going to go watch Strangers Chapter 2, but Chapter 1 didn't do it for me. Moving on. I don't want to ruin the surprises of the year just yet, because that's usually a fun little thing that I like doing at the end of the year. But I will say that one of them is a horror movie I wasn't expecting much from. I'll say that. One is a movie I didn't see coming at all, and the other is a movie that very much divided film Twitter. Well, one of them, because there's been a lot of them so far. Moving on. Favorites. That's a whole other story, because I want to reiterate my stance on how I view and rate movies. I tend to like and enjoy the movies that I watch. And I tend to like and enjoy more movies than other people. There are great, awesome movies. There are movies that are good. There are movies that are okay. And there are movies that are just alright. Then there are movies that aren't good for whatever reason. Poor writing, direction, acting, execution of ideas. That's kind of the main one for me, really. And I know that the filmmaking process in general is not easy. So for something to get made, especially in today's environment, that's impressive. So it takes a lot for me to not like and enjoy a movie, which is why my lists at the end of the year are so long. And I always warn people on that episode, it's like, hey, this episode's probably going to be a little bit long. Which is why I created, kind of two new categories, which is the surprises of the year and then the undetermined movies. This year has been filled, and this is one of the other questions, that movie bloggers and podcasters talked about, is this year is filled with sequels or well-known IPs. Obviously, the big one being Dune Part 2, which, like I mentioned earlier, was probably the biggest and first real big movie of the year. You could arguably say that The Beekeeper, because it was a hit, and then Argyle, which ended up being, kind of the first big flop of the year in a lot of people's eyes. And the IP sequels kept coming. Besides the few that I've already mentioned, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the Garfield movie, The First Omen, Godzilla and Kong the New Empire, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Furiosa, Bad Boys 4, and Inside Out 2. And that's all in the first half of the year. The movies that at least come out in theaters. And I'm not opposed to IP movies or sequels. If they're good or even fine, I'll eat them up. I'll enjoy the hell out of those. I don't care that it makes me one of those people that you look down on film Twitter. I don't. I'm deep down a nerd still to this day. And I love all that stuff. But I also love and like the Oscar award show movies. I do. I still like those. I am the walking duality of man. Okay, that was pushing it. That was pushing it a little too much. I'll admit that was pushing it. But I want it to be clear. I haven't liked and enjoyed all of the IP stuff that's come out this year. Although I have enjoyed or liked the majority of it. Obviously, Dune Part 2 is on that list. Godzilla, Kong, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Bad Boys, Inside Out 2, and even Furiosa. Will they be on my end of the year lists? Maybe. Most of them will probably be there. Where, though, is the question. I'll tell you one more movie that'll definitely be on my end of the year list, The Fall Guy. You want to talk about enjoyable movies. The Fall Guy is that movie. And I'm happy there is a very vocal fan base for that movie online. And I'm sure most, if not all of you, saw it in theaters. But more of you should see it in theaters. I'm just saying. But let's get to the rest of the year, because we still have a lot of great looking movies that are at least on the schedule right now. And of course, the schedule's ever changing. And this is, most of this is the schedule right now, but we still have, those movies that are coming out on the film festival circuit. I don't know when exactly this podcast will drop, but I'll start off with the Independence Day weekend, which belongs to Despicable Me 4, Maxine, Also coming out that, Independence Day weekend, Netflix has Beverly Hills Cop 4, and then the limited release of the Indian martial arts action movie Kill, which I mentioned this on the summer movie season preview episode, that this year's Independence Day releases feel very niche. You got the kids movie, which will probably dominate the weekend, will probably be the weekend movie that week. You got the horror kind of / film Twitter movie. You have the foreign action movie that's still getting a limited release. And then you have a long-awaited sequel, kind of, for Beverly Hills Cop 4, which is coming out on a streaming platform, is coming out on Netflix. The rest of July, you have Neon's highly anticipated Longlegs, which has been getting some early screenings for a lot of people, and everyone is saying it's really, really good. They're saying it's the best horror movie of the year. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Twisters, also another big movie. And then at the end of the month, brings one of the most anticipated movies of the year, which is, of course, Deadpool and Wolverine, which is already, been labeled as the savior of the box office, which is interesting because Inside Out 2 is doing very, very well at the box office. So we'll have to wait and see kind of what happens there. And again, the savior of the box office happens to be a Marvel movie, even though you guys all hate Marvel movies at the box office, but we'll skip that discussion. August continues the horror trend with Neon's other great looking horror movie, Cuckoo, which also has gotten some pretty great reviews. The M. Night Shyamalan movie, the next one, Trap, which Warner Brothers definitely has faith in, because that was supposed to come out in the middle of August, and they kept pushing it up a week. And then a few weeks ago, I think something like, or last month or something like that, they pushed it up to the beginning of the month. So they either have a lot of faith in this movie or they just want to get it out as soon as possible. One of the two. Alien Romulus by Fede Alvarez is finally coming out in August, which is getting a lot of people excited. Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, Blink Twice, opens up at the end of the month, along with the remake of The Crow, which has not been getting any nice or good reviews. September opens up with the Beetlejuice sequel, which people seem to be happy about. I'm happy for you if you're excited for the Beetlejuice sequel. The remake of Speak No Evil, which looks pretty good. The animated Transformers movie, Transformers 1. And the new John Watts movie, Wolves, with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. Halle Berry also has a new horror movie, Never Let Go, which looks okay. And the new animated movie, The Wild Robot, by the team behind How to Train Your Dragon, which if they sell it on that, I think will make this movie very successful. And it will be a very big hit. October, for the film Twitter crowd, the sequel to Joker, which again, if you're happy for that, I'm happy for you. I'm still going to go watch it, but whatever. Smile 2, which is already starting its campaign. And if it's anything like the first movie, I think Paramount has another big hit on their hands, which is not bad for a movie. The first Smile was only supposed to come out on Paramount Plus, and then, they got good test scores, and they're like, all right, let's drop this in theaters. So, let's wait on that. See on that. Of course, Venom: The Last Dance comes out in October, and for all you sickos out there, sickos in a good, loving way, Terrifier 3 comes out in October as well. November is interesting, because November is very much kind of the family-friendly, month, kind of. The much talked about new Dwayne Johnson movie Red, probably much talked about for the wrong reasons because of that story that came out. But trailer came out recently, and you know what? I'll go watch it. I don't care. Gladiator 2 opens in November, along with Moana 2, which I'm sure Disney is hoping and aiming will be another great hit for them. The talked about and anticipated Wicked, which again, for all you looking forward to it, I'm happy for you. Although I hear that it's not like the play, that they kind of changed some stuff, so I don't know how people will be excited for that. Finally, in December, Amy Adams, I just want to mention this because I want to say the name of the movie, has a new movie called Night Bitch, which I don't know if they'll change that title. I hope they don't, because I think it'll be interesting when you go up to the, if you're buying your movies, your tickets at the movie theater, You want to say, can I have a ticket tonight, bitch, please? It's the little things that get me excited. The animated Lord of the Rings movie comes out in December. Sony's much moved Kraven the Hunter finally comes out. Maybe they'll push that back again. Who knows? Disney's back in theaters with their live action, quote unquote, live action movie, Mufasa, The Lion King. Which I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really buying it. And then of course Sonic the Hedgehog 3 comes out, which those movies always do well, especially in December. So they found their platform, they found their niche. They're going to drop those movies. And then of course, Christmas Day. Nothing says Christmas Day like the new Robert Eggers movie, Nosferatu. Nosferatu is a Christmas movie. Just putting it out there. I'm saying it. You don't release a Christmas movie on Christmas without it being Christmas. I'm just saying. That movie, and that looks really, really good. Anyway, so yeah, we got another great half of the year. All those movies that were announced, that are on the schedule, rather. And then, of course, the movies that are still coming out on film festivals at the end of the year that will get, probably some sort of release date before the end of the year. And those are the big movies. There's obviously a bunch of other movies that are there that are coming out that I just kind of, skipped over, didn't talk about. But, yeah, that's kind of what the year is. I think we still kind of have a pretty good, strong year. Like I mentioned, November, I think, is like the month where every week kind of feels like there is a big kind of movie, or there's like a big family movie that people can go watch. December will be interesting because I'm pretty sure, the film festival movies will be coming out in December. They'll probably, there's probably something sitting on a shelf that as soon as we're just waiting to drop it, and stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how the rest of the year shapes out, if the box office continues to quote unquote overperform on some movies, or if, all that talk about box office, movies being, the box office being in trouble and, movies aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe that will die down. It is the summer movie season. A lot of movies, quote unquote, are overperforming this summer, projected because of what happened beginning of the year, but maybe it was just a slow year. Maybe people just didn't want to go out to the theaters this year. And maybe they really, again, being picky about what they're going to go watch. Although the rest of the summer looks pretty good. Like I just kind of briefly overviewed. The rest of the year, again, also looks pretty good. The sky's not falling. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the sky's falling, the box office is doing well, movies are dead, movie theaters are dead. No, they're not, because people who like going to movie theaters are still going to go to the movie theaters, like myself. If I'm the only person keeping it in business, or my family's the only people keeping the movie theater in business, I'm okay with that. There will always be that movie theater going experience. I'm not going to, bash you if you prefer to watch movies at home. That's fine. But, let's not get into the arguments of being like, oh, like the movie theater going experience is dead, you got to get over it. Like, no. Let people enjoy the stuff they want to enjoy, how they want to enjoy it. You bring a bag take into the situation, then, you're on your own. I'm not going to be defending you. But, yeah, I don't know. That's the podcast, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, kind of messing around with this kind of new way of doing it. I just, I want to do something a little different. And, because again, I felt like I was repeating myself the last couple of years when I did this kind of thing. And then I talked about the movies at the end of the year. So I just didn't want to do that. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to hear that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Depending, again, I don't know when I'm releasing this, but hopefully you either have or have had a good Independence Day. Hopefully, everything went all right. Hopefully you ate a lot during the cookouts and stuff like that, or will eat a lot during the cookouts, and enjoy yourself. Plans for the podcast in July. I will, of course, be releasing the June movie roundup, talking about Inside Out 2, The Bike Riders, Quiet Place Day 1, doing some, obviously, individual movie reviews. Obviously, we're going to do something for Deadpool Wolverine. Probably do something for Twisters, because I'm a big fan of that first movie. And we'll see what, the rest, happens. But thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. No matter where you're listening to, if you want a different platform to listen to the podcast, all that is linked down below. Socials are also linked down below. And I will see you guys on the next one. Have a good day. Have a good week, rather. Have a good week. And as always, go watch some movies.
Whoop, whoop, yeah! Give it up! Movies!